Alrighty, we had some technical difficulties. The last stream was completely silent for whatever reason, so hopefully this one isn't. But that's okay because we'll do it all over again. So make sure to like this video and share it with your friends, and also leave a comment down below about your favorite thing about these Empowered Education Thursdays. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so this is our presentation. It takes unity. It's a bystander's guide on being empowered and educated, because once we're educated about the problem, we can be the change to fix it and support survivors along the way. Here at the Turning Point, we have a 24-hour crisis hotline. It is 1-800-886-7273, and there will be an advocate on the line no matter the time or day, rain or shine, that will give you information, resources, and support on that crisis line. And also get you plugged in with counseling, which is the next thing we offer, which is counseling. Our counseling services are 110% free for all survivors of sexual violence and their friends and family members. Next, we offer advocacy, which is where we go into the hospital and we support the survivor during their sexual assault nurse examination. We let them know their rights, we give them resources, and we even get them plugged in with counseling if that's what they want at that time. Overall, advocacy is just to support the survivor with whatever they need in that current moment. Lastly is this, education, where we go into different schools and into the community and different platforms to be able to spread awareness and educate the public about sexual violence, its causes, and ways to protect against sexual violence so that we can eradicate this heinous crime. So our mission is to highlight the impact of sexual violence on individuals and our community through education programs that foster hope, encourage change, and prevent sexual violence. Join us in the fight against sexual violence. The Turning Point is committed to reducing the prevalence of sexual violence in our community. We firmly believe that for this change to occur, each person has a responsibility and must do their part to prevent sexual violence. This week's topic: classism. This is our third week of our isms series, breaking down oppression and its correlation with sexual violence. If you haven't seen our talk on sexism and racism, make sure to watch that after our video and give it a like and share, because even if this is information that you know, it could help someone in your life so much who might not know about these things. So let's get started. So sexual violence and the isms. So discussions about intersecting identities, oppression, and social justice have been a part of anti-violence movements for a long time. Many movement members have adopted a framework for discussing the continuum of sexual violence within the context of oppression and the isms. The same attitudes and behaviors that allow for sexual violence in our culture are reinforced and rooted in sexism, racism, ableism, ageism, and more. There is a theme of intolerance towards the other, who is different from the members of the majority group. Thus, classism serves to maintain the status quo, and by keeping the economically disadvantaged invisible and powerless, and the wealthy powerful. So the definition. So the definition is prejudice against or in favor of people belonging to a particular social class. Classism is another intolerant belief system. Specifically, law defined classism as an institutional and individual distancing. So discrimination, stereotyping, and prejudice against poor people. So when we talk about oppression, we're talking about intolerant beliefs. So sexism, racism, classism, elitism, ableism, so on and so forth, those are intolerant belief systems. So now we're going to get into our public health model. So public health model. This is where we define the problem. So this week is classism. Last week was sexism. The week before that was racism. But overall, the problem is sexual violence. We want to identify the risk and protective factors, and then we want to develop and test prevention strategies. And then we want to ensure widespread adoption. So defining the problem is acknowledging the problem, and then figuring out what leads to this problem, what are risks that make this problem more prevalent, and what are some things that can protect this problem from happening. And then developing and testing strategies to completely eradicate these risk factors and boost up these protective factors, and then spread it, and so that it happens everywhere and the problem is completely gone. So now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. So socioeconomic status, SES, is often measured as a combination of education, income, and occupation. It is commonly conceptualized as the social standing or class of an individual or group. When viewed through a social class lens, privilege, power, and control are emphasized. Furthermore, an examination of SES as a gradient or continuous variable reveals inequities in access to and distribution of resources. SES is relevant to all realms of behavioral and social science, including research, practice, education, and advocacy. So now community risk and protective factors. So assessing and targeting violence at the community level is especially useful because adjustments at this level often affect a large number of individuals. Factors of SES play an important role in this area because communities are often segregated by SES, race, and ethnicity. Targeting the risk and protective factors of violence at the community level will likely engender the greatest change. Community level risk factors for violence include increased levels of unemployment, poverty, and transiency, decreased levels of economic opportunities and community participation, poor housing conditions, and a lack of access to services. Excuse me. In contrast, protective factors buffer individuals and communities through these risks. In communities, these buffers include a stable economy, positive social norms, abundant resources, high levels of social cohesion, and rewards for pro-social community involvement. So this is huge because this is something that if you watch all of our Thursdays at Empowered Educations, you would see that the social behavior, these interpersonal relationships is the key to eradicating a lot of these risk factors, because once we learn how to have productive and healthy conversations with one another and how we treat one another, it creates positive social norms and high levels of social cohesion, which are protective factors that are enormous. So here are some discrepancies in the incidence of violence. So although exposure to violence affects all SES groups, lower SES individuals and families appear to have increased exposure. So a study in 1999 found that women who resided in households that earned less than $10,000 annually had a 4-time greater risk of experiencing violence than women in wealthier households. A 1996 study found that homeless mothers reported significantly more severe instances of physical and sexual assault over their lifetime than low-income house mothers. In 2001, found that youth from low-income neighborhoods witnessed significantly more severe violence, murder, stabbings, than youth from middle and upper-income neighborhoods. So violence is more prevalent in lower SES groups, exposure to it, and being a victim of it. Sexual violence also affects victim relationships with their friends, family, and coworkers. So now we're going to break down some statistics, because if you come to any of my education presentations, you know that I love statistics because it creates the picture for you. It really exemplifies the problem and shows you the numbers. And so 38% of victims of sexual violence experience work or school problems, which can include significant problems with a boss, coworker, or a peer. 37% experience family/friend problems, including getting into arguments more frequently than before, not feeling able to trust their friends/family members, and not feeling as close to them as before the crime. 84% of survivors who were victimized by an intimate partner experienced professional or emotional issues, including moderate to severe distress or increased problems at work or school. 79% of survivors who were victimized by a family member, close friend, or acquaintance experienced professional or emotional issues, including moderate to severe distress or increased problems at work or at school. 67% of survivors who were victimized by a stranger experienced professional and emotional issues, including moderate to severe distress, including problems at work or school. So the common thread is moderate to severe distress at work or at school. And so when we talk about these things about arguments, getting into arguments more frequently than before, having problems with a boss or a coworker, these are things that can get you displaced from your job if your standing isn't as firm there, especially in lower SES households where the jobs may not be as secure. And so having these dialogues and having these conversations, understanding that survivors of sexual violence are going to experience trauma reactions to a traumatic crime where it can hinder and affect their work and or school performance. So now we're going to get into some research studies. I have 3 research studies that we're going to talk about and kind of explore what they say and their findings. So the first research study talked about a multiple regression analysis that indicated that sexism, ageism, and classism and religious intolerance each were significant predictors of rape myth acceptance. The results of the present study have many implications related to oppression and rape myth acceptance. For example, the intolerant beliefs that we are examined predicted almost 1/2 of the variance in rape myth acceptance. Studying rape myth acceptance is important because it is implicated in actual perpetration behavior and may well be important for prevention of sexual violence, which we always want to prevent sexual violence. And the problem is with rape myth acceptance, meaning that you believe the person who is accused of sexual violence, you think that rape is a myth. People who make outcries about sexual violence are lying for attention, or they're just promiscuous, or so on and so forth. Those intolerant beliefs that or to the expense of the survivor and to the advantage of the perpetrator. And when talking about this, oppression and rape myth, there was a correlation there. So let's get into the next one. So the second research study I found talked about women of low incomes are disproportionately represented among sexual violence survivors, yet feminist research on this topic has paid very little attention to social class. A lot of times we talk about ethnicity, age, but never really class. And this article blends recent research studies on class, gender, and sexuality with what we know about sexual violence, and it is argued that there is a need to engage with class distinctions between women in terms of context for and experiences of sexual violence, and to look at interactions between pejorative constructions of working class sexualities and how compliance and defendants are perceived and treated. The class division between the sexual and feminine drawn via the notion of respectability is applied to these issues. So this study found that women of low incomes are disproportionately represented among sexual violence survivors, meaning that of all sexual assault survivors, women of low SES make up a good majority of that percent. So that's what that means by disproportionately represented. So let's get into the third research, and this is going to be broken into two parts because I loved this research study and could not pick just a little piece to share. There was so much that I wanted to share. This is not the whole thing, but this is still a good chunk, so bear with me. So the woman's socioeconomic status was varied so that she appeared to be of low or high SES for this study. Following the vignette, participants completed explicit measures that assessed victim blame, attitudes toward rape victims, and perceived promiscuity. Participants also answered an open-ended question that was coded for minimizing and maximizing language. Last, participants completed an attitude survey that measured classes' attitudes. It was hypothesized that participants who read about the low SES women would show more rape blame, display more negative attitudes about rape victims, respond to the open-ended question with more minimizing language, and perceive her as being more promiscuous. It was also predicted that these explicit measures would be positively correlated and that the language measure would be moderated by participants' classism. Results supported this hypothesis. So research findings part 2 is that participants who read about the low SES survivor showed more negative attitudes, believed her to be more culpable and more promiscuous. The explicit measures were positively correlated. Additionally, participants differed in linguistic minimization and maximization such that participants who were low in classism were more likely to maximize the low SES targets experience, whereas participants who were high in classism were more likely to minimize the low SES targets experience. Taken together, these results suggest that low SES women are stereotyped as being promiscuous and that these stereotypes affect how they may be blamed after cases of sexual assault. Public health significant statement said the results of this study suggest that low social and economic status SES survivors of assault are more likely to be blamed and found culpable for assault than SES women. These attitudes correlate with stereotypes about low SES women's sexuality. So I want you to think about movies that you watch. And when you're watching these movies on Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime, I want you to watch the character development. Watch how people who are poor are treated or represented in the media. Watch how people of higher class are valued or are represented or painted, and how maybe they're treated in more of a sympathetic light, while poor characters are treated in a more or unempathetic light. So just kind of watch the media, watch the movies that you're watching, and kind of assess what is the message that they're sending. So that was the end of my presentation. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. I am so sorry for the technical difficulties, but I hope that you learned something about classism. When we face these problems head on is when we can really eradicate the problem and create lasting change. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. If you did, please like, comment, and share. If you need some inspiration on what to comment, comment if you are a cat person or if you're a dog person. I am a dog person, but leave a comment down below. Share it with your friends and family members because you never know, even though you may know this information, your friends and family members may not. So sharing this message and being like, hey, I saw this and it was really impactful and had a lot of great information and I think that you would like it too, opens up the door for a meaningful conversation where we're facing oppression head on and having these authentic conversations. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. If you did, I look forward to seeing you next Thursday at 10 a.m. If you missed any of our past presentations, they are always linked on our Facebook. And I will see you next Thursday at 10 a.m. Bye.